1 year ago, just a few days ago, I believe on Saturday, was the 1 year anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned, which is the Dobbs decision. So if you hear me saying Dobbs, just so everyone knows, when a Supreme Court decision is overturned, it is overturned using another case. So it's not simply just that the Roe v. Wade was overturned, but rather it was Dobbs versus maybe Turner. I'm trying to remember. Let me look this up really quick. Dobbs v. Jackson, excuse me, that overturned Roe v. Wade and set a new precedent, sending the rights back to the states to decide if abortion was legal or not. And this was probably the biggest conservative win, I would say, in the last maybe decade. And this conservative win, kind of before it, had some other conservative wins, and I'm going to talk about it. But it gives us a good lesson. I mean, the two things I want to talk about first, what is the results of this? Like, what has this led to? And then the second is how can we use this win as a formula to get more wins as conservatives? I want to talk about the title sponsor for this podcast, Gulag America. One thing that I'm very passionate about is that we do not want America to turn into Russia, which is what we'll talk about today. That is why I've partnered with Gulag America. Gulag America can hook you up with high quality apparel that looks as good as it feels. Founded by an Army and Reserve veteran, Gulag America has t-shirts, long sleeves, and hoodies that are great for both men and women. My personal favorite is a shirt. It says, my pronouns are 9mm. And I'll be wearing a shirt next podcast so you guys can see. I'm always wearing my polo shirt, so I know it's going to be quite the contrast. But I have one question for everyone. Do you even know what a gulag is? Often the term gulag refers to literal prisons in Russia. But as I've discussed on this show, we have gulags taking over the West all the time. Some of these, just to name a few, are the military-industrial complex as well as the mainstream media. For a limited time, if you use my code JoshCar10, that's one word, JoshCar10, you will get 10% off at Gulag America. Again, that's JoshCar10 at Gulag America. Great quality and great designs. The first one, what has it done in the last year for us? According to Axios, I want to read just a few stats for you guys. Over at Axios, they have a really fantastic map that you can kind of toggle between what the states looked like before Dobbs and after. But I'm just going to read for you kind of what it gets broken down to. In the last year, at least 24 U.S. states in total were expected to ban abortions all the way or heavily restrict them. This is where they were actually banned. Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Now, not all of these succeeded. These were determined by the state constitution. And so there's a lot of interpretation within each individual state, whether that's possible. So all of those states that I just read off are not necessarily having a full ban of abortion right now. To name just a few, so Utah, for instance, is where I live. Utah had a trigger law that took effect shortly after the Supreme Court released the ruling, but it's been blocked by a judge, and I believe it's still being reviewed. So Utah at this point just has an 18-week ban. Arizona and Florida have a 15-week ban in place. North Carolina has a 20-week ban. And then all the other states that I listed are either total bans or 6-week bans. And then you have some other states, such as Florida, that have just recently started passing things and have kind of inched up on it and passed multiple things in a year rather than just going for the full ban. And this is really important. It's important to show that when legislation is as important as activism is, as important as social changes, legislation is really important as well, because we saw that those 20 states were ready to go as soon as the law was passed. And so it's on us as conservatives to be really sure, it's not always about what our politicians believe. It's who can get the job done. And giving Donald Trump a little bit of credit right now, which is not something that I always do, I'll admit, giving him a little bit of credit, the big win for conservatives was that we elected a Republican in 2016. It happened to be Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was very zealous about getting three conservative Supreme Court justices in the Supreme Court, which made this ruling possible. So even though those judges were awesome and this is a huge conservative win, that victory really happened in 2016 and we just didn't know it. But you have to think to yourself, what would have happened if it had been Hillary Clinton put in 2016? They would have like a crazy supermajority in the Supreme Court. And so my point in saying this, and I know I brought this up so much on this show, we have to be really careful about elections, even more than we previously thought. When you are electing a president of the United States, you are electing the judges, essentially. You're electing someone who's going to choose the judges. Yes, the Senate has some say in who is going to get put forward or not, but at some point, people have to be approved. And so at some point, the Senate lets it go. And so believe me, I know like Trump, going back to Kavanaugh, I mean, all of the people that Trump tried to put in, the Senate really tried to shut it down, but it still got done. And that's something that Trump deserves a lot of credit for. And so going forward in 2024, we need to think to ourselves, who has the best shot at getting elected? Because it's not just about the president. This is about not even just the Supreme Court. It's about the district courts and all of the other judges that the president of the United States is in charge of appointing, as well as going to governors. The governors are the ones that are going to be appointing judges in your individual state. So it's really important that we consider the Supreme Court and what the justices will do when considering who we are going to put in an executive position of power, whether that's on the state level or on the federal level. When it comes to social issues with abortion specifically, let me back up and say this. When it comes to social issues, conservatives are really winning. Recently, I mean, back in like 2012, we as conservatives, we steered clear of social issues. It was all about taxation, the economy, things like that, right? Maybe, and foreign policy as well. Social issues were not a thing at this point. We were not talking about abortion all that much. There were some activists, but the politicians weren't talking about it. In 2016, Trump started this a lot. People started to galvanize behind social issues, especially with the advent of gender theory, or I guess rather the growth of gender theory. Gender theory is much older than 2016. And we are seeing a huge win for conservatives as soon as we start. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's like before, it was liberals literally just beating the crap out of conservatives and them just taking it, and they won. And people wonder, like, why are they winning? It's like, because you're not fighting back. As soon as conservatives got back up and started punching, then it started leveling the playing field. And in fact, conservatives are winning. We see this with gender theory. I brought this up on the podcast a few weeks ago, talked about how basically people were over time realizing that gender was not something that you could just choose, which is crazy to me. In the 90s, people were saying that gender was something you could choose. And today, less people are saying that. More people are saying gender is something that cannot just change. So we're seeing the conservatives are really winning on that issue. The one that they're not winning on is abortion. According to Pew Research, 61% of Americans think that abortion should be legal. And that's just a clear loss for conservatives. Like 61% is pretty high. And I've seen a lot of numbers on that. Those numbers are accurate. I hate to say it. I know a lot of people will say that's not true. I've seen a lot of numbers. I've seen a lot of polls. I've seen a lot of even just anecdotal evidence. And 61% is pretty dang accurate. Now, one caveat with that is that most people are in the 6 to 12 week range. So it's very radical to say that you can't abort up until birth. Not a lot of people are saying that. Most people are saying up till week 6, week 12. But for those of us who are conservative and believe in the science of it, even outside of religion, you may have religious beliefs that make you pro-life. I totally respect that. That is ultimately why I'm pro-life as well. But even just looking at the science, life begins at conception. And if we're trying to preserve life, then the 6-12 week thing just doesn't make sense. And so this is where I come to, where are we going to go from here? The Dobbs decision has happened. We've seen incredible progress in this year for sure, but there are still those battleground states that have not made a lot of progress. If you didn't hear, Kansas put on their election whether or not they should ban abortion in their state, and Kansas voted to keep abortion as a right in their constitution. Kansas, like, that's a red state. Like, Republicans aren't worried about that state. Republicans don't, like, they primary there. They don't, during the general election, they're not campaigning in Kansas. They know they got it. It went towards pro-abortion policies. And so that's a big L. That's a big loss for conservatives, and we need to think in those battleground states, how are we going to make up some ground? Science is very important, as well as religion. Generally speaking, those two are, faith and science are two great ways to convince people of truth. Both have truth. And the question is what story are we going to tell people? And the correct answer is we're going to tell people the story that works for them the best, because both are true. So if you want to take the science aspect, tell them the science. Show them that almost everyone agrees that life begins at conception. If you believe that, you cannot justify abortion. You cannot justify abortion without justifying murder. If you can justify murder, then sure, you could abort someone at 1 week or 2 weeks old. But I mean, there's almost no one in America that's calling for murder at this point. So science is on your side. Religion, almost every major religion is so clear that abortion is wrong. The sanctity of life is at the heart of religion. So tell them the story that works. This is going to be a persuasive effort. We have to fight hard on this. We cannot let it go. We cannot be like Republicans in 2010 that just sat there and got the crap beat out of them. We need to stand up and punch as well and inspire those around us who are more independent thinkers to come on the pro-life side. One of my favorite stories of telling the right story to the right people is Lincoln. Now, Lincoln, a lot of people don't know this, but Lincoln had a lot of different motivations and a lot of different stories for telling people to get them galvanized and ready for the Civil War. Most people know the Civil War wasn't really about slavery. It was about states' rights, right? You've got the Confederacy, you've got the Union, and they were wanting to ban slavery in the whole U.S., and the Confederacy was very upset because they wanted state rights. The story that Lincoln was telling people was very different. Lincoln went to white people in cities and he told them, hey, we're going to go to war with the South. And because we believe in these principles, and he didn't say, and we're doing it because we're getting rid of slavery. What he was telling these white people in the city was, if I release the slaves, if I emancipate the slaves, they will fight in the Civil War. Would you rather have them fight in the Civil War or your son? He told that story to white people in the cities. Then he went to black people in the country and he told them, hey, we're going to war with the South. Will you fight for us? We will emancipate you. He told different stories to both sides to get done what was right. And this is what we need to do with the abortion argument. And it's my hope that we as conservatives will be outspoken about it. We cannot sit down and get punched like we did in 2010.